So, we have been talking about meditation culture. And this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ethics of autonomy and interdependence. And I'll be pulling some things from the book we've been using, David McMann's Rethinking Meditation. Um, and as most of you know, some of us are on retreat together. This is the last day of our retreat. And some of you have just showed up to join us for our daily online, and I really want to say Happy New Year to everyone. And how you celebrate the new year is really according to your culture. When you celebrate the new year is according to your culture. This is part of what we've been talking about. I mean, for many years, I've celebrated the Chinese New Year as the real New Year. And then the Persian New Year was the real New Year. So it's these different calendars and systems are according to where you live, where you're born, what you believe in. And on our retreat, you had the autonomy to celebrate the new year as you chose. We didn't give you any requirements. And this is one of the things about an online retreat, which is another culture that has been emerging for us. It's been unfolding over the last few years. That if we were in person, we would have had to, you would have had much less autonomy. You would have had to keep the silence. We would have been much more interdependent on each other. But the online retreats really provide a sense of autonomy, and that you can make your choices and choose to be you. But this is the thing about autonomy, which is really, having the freedom or the independence to choose. And also the thing about interdependence is that we're connected to others and we're embedded in our cultures. So I'm really going to talk about these two together today because we value both of them within reflective meditation. So here I'm going to quote David McMann. He says, in most historical contexts, the who am I and the what should I do, which are two important spiritual questions that we circle again and again. And I'll add a few more. Who do I do things with, and for whom do I do things? These have been questions that are often settled historically at birth. And it wasn't until really democratic context that settling these matters for oneself emerged as a prominent ideal. Now, even in there, he gives a caveat that, needless to say, we still have constraints based on class, race, gender, socio-political circumstances. And he's saying based on how we're interdependent with each other, with the world that we live in. So to me, these two can't really be separated. One of the comments that had come up during the retreat was, well, if I am a product of my culture and my choices are a product of my culture, where does this leave me? Who am I? What do I do with this? And the Buddha had a lot to say about this, and Buddhist teachings have a lot to say about this. Excuse me. And so I'm going to bring in two teachings here. And this is very common in Buddhist teachings. Often they're spoken in metaphors, or they're spoken in negatives, like the absence of something or the positive of another. So the teachings that I'm going to talk about, the first one is what we're not. And this is a teaching on anatta. This is what we're not. We're not an enduring, unchanging. Is that right? No, I'm just saying it wrong. I just had a blank. We're not an enduring, unchanging self. Our sense of self, who we are, is fluid. It changes over time and in different situations, from decade to decade, year to year, day to day, minute to minute. There's not a sense of self that's always accessible. And there's not a who that arises from conditions or formed and reformed by conditions. Yet we need a sense of coherence. Some things do continue, and we need healthy self-structures to live in the world. So what are we then? Well, what we talked about, or what he talked about, is that we're aggregates, or we're these 5 processes that come together to create a human being, and that we're made up and constructed of things, of processes. And he talked about the aggregates as a way to explain who we are as a whole, as a human being. I like what Bill Wellhouse has developed with Brad Parks and Anna Dalacqua in our Sangha. He talks about them as we're 5 systems of subjective experience. And that is a much bigger teaching. I'm going to go with the simple teaching, which is the 5 metaphors that the Buddha gave for who we are, for what we are. So our form, our body, is like foam that appears solid, but it isn't stable. Our feeling is like bubbles that pop up and burst at any given time. Our perception is like a mirage that changes depending on time, light, and space. Our mental formations, our narratives, our stories are like peeling back the leaves of a banana tree and not finding any pit. And our consciousness, our way of knowing, is like a magic show. It's tricky, wondrous, and mystifying. So I'm going to add my own metaphor. It kind of seems like we're like a strobe light when we're plugged into an outlet. Blobs of things that are merging and dancing and kind of coming together, and stagnant in some places and different colors. And, you know, the thing about this is it's not always my experience. As I age, I don't really feel like foam that's unstable or not solid at times. I'm stiffening up. I feel certain things that feel more solid. And so these metaphors are kind of reminders that it might not always be our experience, but this is what the teaching is that consider that we're really like this. And I do get a sense of that stiffening up in my body changing when I get a massage or I get acupuncture. I can feel more of the things moving and changing and shifting. So in reflective meditation, we're really, giving people the freedom in meditation practice to be with the strobe light, with these metaphors that the Buddha just talked about, the flurry of thoughts, of emotions and desires and ruminations that constitute our experience. And it's interesting, David McMann really brings out in the standard version of meditation that you don't want to go in that direction, because those things are considered leading us to false conclusions and about ourselves and other people in our lives. But this is where I think autonomy and interdependence come together in our practice, is the more freedom we have in meditation, the more we can see the interdependence of our experience. What's been compartmentalized often can be seen as connected, or there's threads that overlap. What gets considered one way has another perspective. Things open up and change and shift. What looks ideal gets broken down into something more realistic. And what gets built is often more useful and closer to something helpful and wholesome. And I feel like our Sangha, I'm going to go over a few minutes here just as a warning, not much longer, but I have a few more things to say. But I've seen our Sangha go in this direction with not having one autonomous leader. Nelly and I have tried to lead as our service to the Sangha. And we both have natural inclinations that have us step up to take on the work of keeping the Sangha going. But we've been asking for more help, and we've been more aware of how interdependent we are with you. Yesterday, we met as a visioning group, and a few people joined us to really consider some of the decisions that we need to make as a Sangha, as a group. And it's going to really change it from being two people to a committee, to a group of folks. And I think this is an example of being autonomous and interdependent. We have room to make some decisions on our own, but we're also asking for help for others to come in because, of our conditions of aging and burnout, and we just can't do things on our own. So another way I've seen this play out, and we wrote about this in our book, and I just find this very interesting because it was a process that emerged for us. And to me, this isn't the interplay of autonomy and interdependence. And this is what we state in our introduction. While you'll hear our voices in this book, this is our book, Reflective Meditation, the Cultivating Kindness and Curiosity in the Buddhist Company. While you'll hear our voices in this book, you may not always know who is speaking. This is a step forward. We consider it a step forward in our practice. We've become less concerned with who said what. In fact, many times we can't remember who said what. But if it's honest and it's relevant, then it belongs to us all. We keep cross-fertilizing each other's thoughts, feelings, experience, and understanding. And we write about ourselves, and in this practice we talk about ourselves, not to elevate ourselves, but to take our teaching out of the abstract and conceptual and into the nitty-gritty of life stuff. While at times in reading the book you may not know who is speaking, we do want both our names on the book. We believe that most of us need acknowledgement and care when presenting ourselves to others. There are many ways people can feel hurt, and by not being given proper attribution. So we follow a middle way between applauding our personal accomplishments and neglecting them. So autonomy and independence, I think we're going to be finding a middle way between the two. And the two ethics can almost feel like a paradox. And you might find yourself in one extreme where you're overly independent or reliant or trying to really take it all on yourself. And other times you're very embedded in being dependent on others and can't really find your way out of being stuck to people. And that we're going to have to kind of go back and forth between these two, because the middle way isn't something like just moderation, just do this in the right moderation. It's really more like going between these extremes and becoming more aware of them when they're operating, and that you'll bounce back and forth between autonomy and interdependence. And I'm going to end with this, that the middle way, it can't be known until it emerges. And it's always shifting and changing, so it's kind of hard to pin down. But we can see it, we can know it, we can point to it, just as we can point to the moon, even though we haven't walked upon it, most of us. Okay, I'll end here, and we'll do our practice together today.